It was the kind of quiet that screams louder than a siren, the kind of silence that settles in your chest like a dropped stone, heavy and cold. You see it in the way the air hangs thick right before a massive storm breaks, or, in my case, right before a family crisis you never saw coming decided to unload itself onto your shoulders. I remember standing there in the hallway, the front door clicking shut behind me, and the sound echoed with a strange finality. It was just after 6 p.m. The harsh afternoon light was fading into that bruised twilight, and the atmosphere inside the house, my brother's house, immediately felt wrong. Usually, walking in to babysit my nieces and nephew is chaos in the best possible way. Shrieks, sticky hugs, the smell of disinfectant and Cheerios. But this time it was just tension. I'm 23. I love my brother's kids more than lukewarm coffee on a Monday morning. They are my whole world, especially the little ones. There's the older niece, Maya, and my nephew, both used to my chaotic energy. But then there's Mia. Little Mia, barely 18 months old, my youngest niece, and lately she's been my small emotional Everest. 2 months ago, I decided to make a change. Nothing drastic, just a subtle shift in shade. A new hair colour. It sounds so trivial, doesn't it? Just a few highlights, a bit more warmth. But for Mia, that small change seemed to rewrite reality. She started pulling away. Not outright fear, but this deep, mournful sadness whenever my new hair caught the light. It was heartbreaking. Her mum, my sister-in-law, said it was just the colour, that she didn't recognise me. But watching this tiny human cling to the familiar and reject the slightly altered version of her favourite aunt, it felt like a tiny betrayal every time. This specific evening was already a recipe for disaster. I've been running myself ragged lately. Early shifts at work, non-stop. Since I don't drive, the commuting eats up hours of my life, leaving me utterly drained by the time I clock out. My brother and his wife were heading out for an adult evening, a rare occurrence. They asked me to take Mia from 6 p.m. for just 3 hours. "She'll be asleep for most of it, eh?" they assured me. Easy money, I thought. A little quiet time with a sleeping baby and an older, easier kid. The trouble started the second the door closed. My brother, his wife, and the 2 older kids swept out, full of evening plans, leaving Mia standing there, bewildered. She hadn't been told she was staying behind. She thought she was going with them. When the door sealed her fate, trapped in the house with only Auntie, the realization hit her small face like a physical blow. She didn't scream immediately. That would have been better. Instead, she just went utterly still, her lower lip starting to tremble, and then she latched onto my leg with the desperation of a drowning sailor grabbing driftwood. Her arms wrapped around my shin, tight, while her eyes, wide and glistening, looked up at me, an unspoken question hanging in the air. "Why did you let them leave me?" "Hey, sweet pea, hey," I murmured, my voice trying to be soft but cracking with instant guilt. I gently tried to pry her grip, but she held fast. I scooped her up, balancing her against my chest, trying to show her that the world hadn't ended. "It's okay, it's just Auntie for a little bit. Mummy and Daddy will be back later." She buried her face into my shoulder, and I could feel the dampness of her little t-shirt already beginning to soak up her distress. I walked her toward the kitchen, aiming for distraction. "How about some milk? Or maybe some crackers? Did you want your special teddy?" She shook her head against my neck, the rejection stinging. I set her down near the big, beautiful kitchen island, the one with the chunky wooden legs that felt safe and solid. She crawled underneath, dragging her favourite faded teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles, with her. She sat huddled there, a tiny, heartbroken silhouette against the tiled floor, rocking back and forth. This was the new normal with my hair. Upset, anxious, clinging. I decided to try the bottle first, hoping the familiar routine would soothe her. She took a few tentative sips, but her eyes never left the doorway, waiting for the people who just walked out. The silence under the island was agonizing, broken only by her little, hitching breaths. That's when my phone buzzed. It was Jill, a friend from work. She was probably calling to nail down pickup times for tomorrow. I picked up, apologizing silently to Mia for the intrusion. I missed her first call, so I quickly tried to dial her back. In that moment of distraction, trying to navigate the contacts list while keeping one eye glued to the space under the counter, my finger slipped. Instead of Jill's name, I hit my brother's contact. The phone instantly connected. "Hello?" My brother's voice boomed, sounding cheerful, likely mid-outing. Panic seized my throat. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," I hissed into the phone, pulling it away from my ear as if it had burned me. "I didn't mean to call you. I was calling Jill. So sorry, gotta go, bye." I slammed the phone off before he could even register the apology or the bizarre context. I turned back to Mia, heart pounding, ready to resume the delicate art of soothing her. But the accidental call had been the final straw for her fragile equilibrium. The sound of my voice, slightly raised and suddenly sharp, coupled with the anxiety she was already feeling, detonated her composure. The small, huddled shape under the island erupted. It wasn't just crying. It was a full-body tremor of distress. Her small hands clawed at the air, and the noise she made was raw, primal. She wasn't just sad anymore. She was terrified. Tears streamed down her face so fast they were practically washing the fine fringe across her forehead. She was hiccuping, hyperventilating, utterly inconsolable. I dropped to my knees, trying to get on her level, peering under the island. "Mia, baby, it's okay. Auntie's right here. Look at me," she screamed, batting my hand away weakly. She was so worked up I couldn't even get the bottle near her mouth. The fear was that she wouldn't drink, wouldn't eat, wouldn't take her little dose of Calpol she needed before bed. Her whole tiny body was vibrating with anxiety. I tried everything. Singing, rocking, offering favourite toys, even just sitting silently and waiting. Nothing worked. She just dissolved further into hysterics, the wetness on her forehead from pure, raw emotion indicating just how far past the breaking point she was. I looked at the clock. I was supposed to have her for 3 hours, most of which should have been sleep. I had barely managed 30 minutes, and now I had a full-blown emotional emergency on my hands. I couldn't reach her. I couldn't calm the storm brewing inside that little body. Finally, heart heavy with defeat, I knew I had to call in reinforcements. It was too much for me right now, especially with her reaction to my new hair complicating things. "Okay, sweet girl," I whispered, wiping a tear track from her cheek. "Auntie needs some help, all right? We're going to call Grandpa." I grabbed my phone again, making sure this time I had the right number, and dialed my dad. The relief when my dad answered was immediate and profound. He knew the drill. He knew Mia's moods, and thankfully, he knew about the hair thing. "Dad, I'm so sorry, but I need help," I admitted, keeping my voice low so it wouldn't spike Mia's distress further. "She is having a meltdown, a huge one. I can't get her to settle, and I'm worried she won't drink anything." My dad, bless him, didn't ask questions about why or how. He just said, "I'm leaving now. 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes felt like an eternity spent listening to the sound of my niece actively shattering. I sat cross-legged on the floor, leaning my back against the cool wood of the island base, using my body as a shield to keep the outside world away from her panic bubble. I just whispered nonsense, trying to regulate my own breathing, so she could maybe subconsciously pick up on it. When the doorbell rang, Mia actually flinched, but the sound of my father's familiar heavy boots on the porch was apparently the magic ticket. I uncurled myself, scooped up the still sobbing toddler, and carried her to the door. When Dad walked in, the change was instantaneous. It was like flipping a switch. The sheer volume dropped, the thrashing subsided, and she buried her face into my neck again, a desperate, clinging embrace. But the wild energy was draining away. "There she is," Dad said, his voice calm and deep, never rushing. He didn't try to take her from me right away. He just stood there, letting the situation settle. I handed Mia over. It was the most painful physical handover. As she left my arms, she gave a final, shuddering cry, and then her body went limp, exhausted by the sheer effort of being that upset. Dad settled her against his chest, the way my brother used to hold her when she was a newborn. He walked straight to the living room sofa, sat down, and just held her, swaying slightly. Within minutes, the tension was replaced by heavy, sleepy breaths. I watched, breathless, as her eyelids fluttered, then closed. My rock star dad had done it again. I waited until she was fully out, that deep, peaceful sleep that only comes after utter exhaustion. Then I carefully nudged my dad. "Can we give her the cowpole now?" He nodded, gently placing her down in her cot, tucking her in and covering her with her favourite blanket. We both stared at the baby monitor for a minute, watching the faint, grainy image of her chest rising and falling peacefully in the black and white screen. "You did great, A," Dad whispered, clapping me gently on the shoulder. "She's just sensitive to changes. And that hair, it's a shock to their little systems. Don't take it personally." I felt the tears prick my own eyes now that the adrenaline was fading. "I feel like I failed, Dad. I couldn't stop her crying. And then I messed up the phone call." "You called me when you needed help. That's not failure. That's responsible. She was inconsolable. It happens," he assured me, his conviction unwavering. "Go get yourself a glass of water. I'll keep an eye on her until they get back." I spent the next hour feeling oddly disconnected, sitting on the sofa, just watching the monitor. I kept checking the little blinking light on the camera, trying to reassure myself that she was truly okay, truly settled. I even tried to keep my mind busy by petting the family dog, Buster, who was currently sprawled across my feet, offering silent, furry support. When my brother and his wife finally returned, they seemed relaxed, laughing quietly about whatever evening they'd had. They found Dad still in the living room, scrolling through his phone, and Mia fast asleep. "How was everything?" my brother asked, immediately looking toward the monitor. "Perfectly calm once the initial hurdle was cleared," Dad said smoothly, standing up. "She got a little worked up when you left, but A handled it beautifully. We got her settled down with some milk and medicine about an hour ago. Deep sleep now." I stepped forward, my voice subdued. "I'm so sorry about the initial crying fit. She was very distressed. I honestly couldn't get her to stop until Dad got here." My brother's wife gave me a quick, tight hug. "Thank you so much, A. We really appreciate you stepping in. It means a lot." My brother clapped me on the back. "No worries, kiddo. We figured she'd be dramatic. She gets that from her mother," he joked, winking at his wife, who swatted his arm lightly. The tension seemed to dissipate as they thanked Dad profusely, focusing on how well he managed the end result. I felt a wave of relief. They understood. They knew it wasn't my fault. As I was leaving, trying to keep the conversation light, I remembered the accidental call. "Oh, by the way, sorry for that accidental dial earlier," I said, shuffling my keys. "I was trying to call Jill from work, organising a lift for tomorrow morning." My brother and his wife exchanged a look, a subtle, almost invisible shift in their expressions. "Oh, Jill," my brother's wife said, her tone suddenly cooler, the warmth evaporating. "How is she doing?" "Good, I guess," I mumbled, suddenly feeling awkward again. "She was just telling me about her holiday next week. Anyway, I should head out before I drive myself crazy wondering if I locked the back door." I made my excuses and left, the air already feeling thicker than it had on arrival. They were polite, but the easy flow of conversation had vanished. 30 minutes later, I was home, finally kicking off my shoes and feeling the fatigue of the long day wash over me. Just as I was about to collapse on my own couch, my phone vibrated with a text from my sister-in-law. "Did you notice Mia's nightlight wasn't off when you left?" My blood ran cold. Nightlight? I stared at the screen. I hadn't put her to bed. Dad had. And the monitor, which I had been glued to for nearly an hour, only showed the main area of the cot in that grainy, terrible black and white. It certainly didn't show the wall adjacent to the cot, where a small lamp might be plugged in. "Oh no," I typed back immediately, my fingers shaking. "I am so sorry. I didn't see that at all. I was watching the monitor constantly, but I didn't put her down. Dad did. I'll check the monitor settings tomorrow. I can barely see anything in that thing." I sent it, my stomach twisting. It felt like I was arguing semantics over a detail that, to them, might signify total neglect. I waited. The little "delivered" notification popped up, but the 3 dots indicating she was typing never appeared. Then, nothing. Silence. For 10 minutes. 20. I texted again, offering to call her, to explain that Dad handled the bedtime routine. "Read." No reply. I felt that familiar stab of anxiety, the feeling that I was being judged, deemed careless, while standing outside the circle of their immediate trust. I brushed it off, telling myself they were just tired, or maybe my brother had distracted her. I convinced myself it was just a tiny oversight, nothing more. The next morning, exhausted but trying to remain positive, I went over to my parents' house for lunch. Dad was there, looking completely unbothered. "So, how are things?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Did brother's wife say anything more about the light?" Dad took a slow bite of his sandwich, chewing deliberately. "Yeah, they're still a bit worked up about it, eh?" "About the light. I apologise, Dad. It's an awful monitor. And Dad put her down, not me." "It's not just the light," Dad said, lowering his voice slightly, looking around as if checking for eavesdroppers, even though we were alone. "They're pissed about you talking to Jill while Mia was upset." My jaw dropped. The sheer absurdity of it hit me first, followed by a wave of white-hot frustration. "What? Talking to Jill?" "Dad, that call lasted maybe 45 seconds. I told them I had to go because Mia was crying. I wasn't neglecting her. I was arranging my transport for the next day while I was trying to console her under the island." Dad held up a placating hand. I know. I told them that too. I told them you were trying to organise a pick-up for work, that it was brief." "And?" I prompted, my voice rising. "What did they say to that?" "Well," Dad sighed, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "They said that even if it was 45 seconds, you should have given your full attention to Mia, especially when she was in that state. They think you prioritised a quick phone call over comforting her." I felt sick. They had taken a split-second necessary administrative task, one I completed while physically trying to comfort the child, and spun it into a narrative of profound, deliberate neglect. The fact that I had called Dad in immediately after was completely erased by the memory of me holding a phone. But she was already screaming when I called Jill back. I hung up on Jill immediately when she started crying harder. I never ignored her, I argued, leaning forward. They weren't even here. They don't know what it looked like. I wish they would just talk to me directly. "Well, they didn't," Dad confirmed, wiping his mouth. "They came to me first. They were already upset when they saw the light. And then, when I mentioned you were on the phone when you called me, that's when the real anger surfaced. So now my brother is mad at me, and I can't even approach him because you told him you'd sort it out?" The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place, cementing my helplessness. I remembered dinner with my brother earlier that evening, after the childcare incident, but before Dad revealed the full fallout. He had been quiet, his usual easy banter replaced by clipped responses. I'd thought he was just tired from work. Now I realised he was already harbouring this resentment, built up from an incident I didn't even know he witnessed the context of. "He didn't say much at dinner, but he was definitely cold," I admitted, rubbing my temples. "This is ridiculous. They're making me sound like a monster who leaves a toddler sobbing while chatting about holidays." "They're protecting their child, eh?" Dad said gently, though I could hear the slight edge of frustration in his voice too. "They want to believe that when they leave her with you, she is 100% the focus. That phone call, combined with the light being on, painted a picture they didn't like." "But I did my best. And I called you. What more could I do?" I pleaded, feeling the injustice sting deeply. They were treating my honest effort like a calculated risk. They think I smoothed it over, Dad said, nodding toward the door. They think it's handled because I said I talked to you and that you understood. And that was the crux of the problem. My brother and his wife, instead of coming to me, the person who actually spent 3 hours trying to manage a meltdown, went to my parents, creating a layer of mediation and miscommunication that left me completely isolated and feeling branded as careless. I couldn't let this fester. I couldn't allow them to believe I prioritized a quick chat with a coworker over their baby's distress. But Dad was adamant. Don't approach them yet. They need to cool down, and frankly, they don't know I told you this much. So, what was the move? Walk on eggshells, pretending I hadn't been publicly disciplined through my father? Or risk making things worse by directly confronting their judgment? The advice from my dad, don't approach them, felt like being told to sit on my hands while my reputation burned. It was the most passive, agonizing instruction imaginable. If I stayed silent, I confirmed the narrative they had built, the careless aunt who needed others to clean up her messes. If I spoke up, I violated my father's directive, potentially throwing him into the middle of a fight he thought he'd mediated. I spent the next 24 hours operating in a state of low-grade, anxious hypervigilance. Every text from my brother or his wife was treated like an incoming bomb. I kept my phone close, rehearsing polite, neutral responses in my head before sending anything remotely personal. I needed to see Mia, but the thought of walking back into that house, knowing they were harboring silent resentment over a 45-second phone call, made my stomach clench. When I finally saw them next, it was at a family gathering 2 days later. Mia was with her mother, clinging to her skirt as usual, but she didn't look upset, just wary. My brother and his wife greeted me with that polite, brittle warmth that screams, "We are pretending everything is fine." My brother leaned in, clapping me on the shoulder a bit too hard. "Hey, you. Hope work's been less crazy." "It has," I managed, forcing a smile that felt like stretching dry clay on my face. "How was the rest of your night after I left the other night?" His wife jumped in before he could answer. "Oh, it was fine. Mia slept like a log after Dad got here. We just had a little organisational glitch with the bedtime routine, that's all." Organisational glitch. That's what they were calling it. A calculated oversight on my part. I decided then and there that I couldn't stand the ambiguity. The worst part wasn't the anger. It was the feeling of being misunderstood and judged by the people whose approval I valued most. I had to break the fragile peace my dad had engineered. If they were going to be mad, I wanted them to be mad at me, not at some distorted phantom version of my actions relayed through a third party. I waited until the older kids were occupied with dessert, and Mia was settled in a high chair, happily gumming a piece of apple. I took a deep breath and approached my brother first, pulling him aside toward the patio door, away from the main cluster of relatives. "Can I talk to you for a second? Just about the other night?" I started, my voice low but firm. He tensed immediately. "Sure, what's up?" His eyes darted nervously back toward his wife inside. "Look, Dad told me that you guys are mad about me being on the phone while Mia was upset, and also about the nightlight," I said, skipping the small talk. "I need to tell you my side, because whatever Dad said, it didn't land right, and I feel like you think I was negligent." I laid it out, fast and clean, stripping away the drama and leaving only the cold facts. "I was trying to call Jill back. I accidentally called you first, which was embarrassing, so I hung up fast. Jill then started talking about her vacation plans, and I said, 'I have to go, Mia is upset.' I was holding her, trying to get her to take her bottle under the island while she was already crying. I spoke to Jill for less than a minute total before she started screaming harder, and that's when I hung up and called Dad." I paused, letting the harsh reality of the quick timeline sink in. I was never ignoring her. I was multitasking a crisis. The second she escalated beyond what I could handle, I called Dad. I was only with her alone for about 15 minutes total before I called for backup because I couldn't soothe her new anxiety. My brother listened, his face unreadable, but the tension around his jaw lessened slightly. He looked genuinely surprised by the specificity of the timeline. Dad, he told us you were just chatting when she was upset, my brother admitted quietly. He didn't paint the picture of you trying to settle her first. He made it sound like you were distracted while she was already spiraling. And the light? I asked, bracing myself. That was focus, he admitted. She was already anxious because Mia wouldn't settle for you earlier in the week. And then when she saw the light on, she spiraled into, A wasn't paying attention to the details. We jumped to conclusions based on incomplete information. He looked genuinely sheepish. We should have asked you first. I'm sorry we let it fester and brought Dad into it instead of confronting you. Relief flooded me so intensely I almost sagged against the doorframe. Thank you. I was going crazy thinking I was being painted as the worst aunt ever. I love her so much, and the hair thing is hard enough without thinking I'm failing at the basic job. We know you love her, he reassured me, pulling me into a quick, firm hug. It's just, she's our first baby girl, and those early years are a minefield of anxiety. We get overprotective. We overreacted. My bad. When I walked back inside, my sister-in-law was watching me with a more open expression. I walked straight over to her, bypassing the small talk. Hey, I said softly. I just talked to brother. I wanted to apologize for how the whole situation looked, but also I really needed you to know that I was trying my absolute best in a tough situation. When I accidentally called you guys earlier, I panicked, and I think that panic fed into her reaction. It wasn't neglect. It was a mess of bad timing and a toddler who hates my new hair. She looked down at Mia, who was still happily eating. She sighed, the hard shell cracking. I know you love her, A, and you're right. We should have come to you. It was easier to vent to than to start an argument right before our evening out. The light was a stupid thing to get hung up on, I admit it. I just felt like I couldn't trust my gut that night. You can trust me, I insisted. Always. If I ever feel like I can't handle it, I will call you or Dad immediately. I promise. The air finally cleared. It took direct, slightly uncomfortable confrontation, but it was necessary. The tension melted away, replaced by the familiar, warm, messy love of family. Now, looking back on that entire ordeal, the initial distress, the accidental phone call, the misinterpreted actions, and the silent judgment, it taught me something profound about family dynamics and perception. When you are in the middle of an intense emotional situation, especially with a young child, your actions are often messy, reactive, and imperfect. You are focused on immediate triage, not on creating a perfect, reportable narrative for outside observers. But to the people watching from the periphery, or to those who only hear the summarized version, those messy moments can look like outright failures. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the most loving and responsible thing you can do is break protocol and insist on clarity, even if it risks making things momentarily awkward. Dealing with the immediate awkwardness of confrontation is infinitely better than stewing in the corrosion of miscommunication. And Mia? Well, a week later, she saw me wearing a brightly coloured baseball cap. She tentatively approached, touched the brim, then looked up at my face, the face framed by familiar, friendly features, and offered a small, gummy smile. She didn't hug me, but she didn't recoil either. It was a start, a tiny, hopeful signal that the storm had finally passed. So, when you find yourself being judged based on incomplete information, when you know you tried your absolute hardest, what would you do? Would you follow the advice to stay quiet and let the narrative settle? Or would you risk the immediate fallout to set the record straight, like I finally did? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if these raw, honest slices of life resonate with you, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story where things go completely off the rails.